Hi, I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Hi, my name is Chrissy Clements. Everyone watches AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. Today is December the 3rd, 2012. I hope everybody out there is having a very nice day. This show again is called All About You, a program that's designed to give the guests their entire life story. Today I kind of have a very special guest, kind of like an early birthday present, because I have a birthday coming up in a couple days, and it's going to be a special program, a 1 hour format of All About You. I have the former mayor of Hartford, Eddie Perez, and basically Eddie Perez is going to come today and give his entire life story. Good morning, Eddie Perez. How you doing?
Good morning.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Could you kind of tell the people out there your life story, where you grew up at as a child and how your life basically got started?
Sure. Well, I was born in Corozal, Puerto Rico. It's a little rural, hilly town in the central part of the island. It's a little bay from way in the back
Okay.
of island activity.
Uh-huh.
We moved to New York City when I was close to 8 years old.
Okay.
And we went there to Brooklyn
Mm-hmm.
and spent about 3.5, close to 4 years in Brooklyn. Before 1969, we came to Hartford.
Okay.
And then I spent my adolescent life here in Hartford, began my professional career right out of Hartford High. I graduated from Hartford High. Went to community college for about a year, decided that I wanted to kind of hit the pavement,
Okay.
and started working as a community organizer up in North Hartford. Spent 9 years up there working to what eventually became One Chain.
Mm-hmm.
Started at a tenant organizing group called the Clay Hill Coordinating Committee, and things involved was very successful. Got a lot of support from grassroots folks and funders, and the organization was, and I left when things were going well.
Okay.
The organization lasted about another, total about 30 years. And I was one of the founders, and I say one of the founders because there were many people who wanted to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got recruited by the Urban League of Greater Hartford and the National Puerto Rican Forum to run a project up in Stowe Village.
Okay.
When the Ville was the Ville.
The Ville, yes, I remember that.
When the Ville was the Ville.
Uh-huh.
And it was a welfare to work project for moms. And as you probably know, and at that time, there were third, fourth generation families still living in Stowe. So we were not only trying to break the cycle of poverty, but also motivate people that the Ville wasn't the only thing. At that time, apartheid was big
Yeah.
across the world, but we had a big apartheid when it came to the way public housing people were living in our city and throughout our country. Since then, with President Clinton and all the other stuff that has happened, public housing has been reinvented somewhat, not
Yes.
completely, but they're not the nightmares of the past. So I spent 3 years working for a project called Project MASH, Make Something Happen. That was up at Stowe. And then I moved from that. I got a call and got recruited to go to Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
And spent about 11 years at Trinity. And the first, I worked for 3 of the presidents there. I had nothing to do with them leaving.
Okay, all right.
But I spent worked through 3 presidency. I worked in the president's office throughout that time as an assistant to the president. Left as an assistant vice president for institutional and community relations. And throughout my whole public service career, I sort of shied away from public elected office, but it was always mentioned to me. I probably got to run for public office since I was 18 years old. Got approached to run for the Board of Ed way back then, city council, town committee, everything. And I would always say, no, that's not what I want to do. But I served on the Charter Revision Commission. I also did not want to serve on the Charter Revision Committee. I got asked by Mayor Perry, Mayor Milner, Mayor Atherson, and all those guys when they were trying to revamp the charter. Didn't do it. I eventually took a call from Mayor Peters, Mike Peters, sat on the Charter Revision, and that kind of began the journey to me running for mayor and then serving as mayor for close to 8.5 years.
Well, obviously, we know about your career as a mayor and your political career, and obviously we want to definitely get into that at some point during this program. But kind of your childhood growing up, was it kind of an easy childhood, a difficult childhood, a lot of challenges? I mean, what was your childhood at growing up? What kind of things did you actually go through as a child growing up in Hartford?
Well, I would say it's probably a normal childhood for somebody who grows up in urban America during those times. Since we arrived in this country, although my dad was present for the first 10 years of my life, he was. My mom had to sort of be both dad and mom.
Okay.
So and then since we came to Connecticut in '69, she was a single household female, and we grew up on public assistance. We grew up in the toughest neighborhoods in the city, in the toughest building. One of our claim to fame was that we were the last family leaving before the city closed down the building. Because we used to have to move to the worst housing stock because that's all we could afford. And we usually moved 2 blocks down from the last address. I lived in some 17 buildings, 20 addresses between 6th grade and 12th grade.
Oh boy, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And I spent 4 years at Hartford High. So I went to Little Arsenal, Brackett, West Middle, Bonner Brown, and Hartford High. 7 schools in that same time period. So we bounced around a lot. I'm the second of 9, 8 boys, 1 girl.
Okay.
And because early on, my mom depended on me to first do translation. When we were in New York, she didn't speak English, and I learned English kind of quickly. So I became the father figure somewhat, and the person who made all the decisions, along with my mom, how to manage through the system here. And so, I matured a little earlier than most kids.
Okay.
Also, one of the most significant things in my life was that I joined Sacred Heart Church, my home church, St. Pew. I've been at for 37 years. Okay. Wow. Over on Eli Street. Everybody knows that it's behind the old Firestone. That's no longer there.
Yes.
That was the church that really help the Puerto Rican community stabilize and develop here in the city. So doing the first Mass was, I think, in the early 50s, but the high point of our growth in the city was from about 1965 to 85. Okay. And anything that happened during that period happened at Sacred Heart Church, whether it was community organizations like La Casa de Puerto Rico, San Juan Center, the Hispanic Health Council, the bilingual education challenge. So I was around a lot of activism at the time, and got some early organizing skills and leadership skills at the church as a result of my work with the church. I was in the church youth group. I was in the men's group, and we used to do, deliver meals and visit the sick and all that kind of. But I was doing that when I was 14 years old. So by the time I got 16, I was a leader in the church, and became more engaged in in the neighborhood, and started thinking about community development and about how this neighborhood could be turned around. And I was involved in an organizing committee for North Hartford as early as I got out of Hartford High in 1976. So that fall, I was in a sponsoring committee, and the sponsoring committee brought in some, highly skilled organizers from the Connecticut Citizen Action Group. But they were skilled in organizing, but they weren't skilled in communicating and understanding the diverse groups that made up the Clay Hill and Northeast neighborhood, which was where my interest lied. My interest lied basically up Main Street and down Albany. And we didn't know Blue Hills existed then.
Okay, didn't know that.
It was a high-end neighborhood. Somewhere, I think either Vine or Garden Street was the border of the North End. Okay. So we were doing work in the North End. One of my early mentors, I had two mentors, Father Geckler, Tom Geckler, who was with me. He arrived about the same time I got engaged at Sacred Heart Church, and he was a great educator and big on social justice and trying to get people to understand how power and social justice move together. So he was a great teacher. Then my other teacher and other mentor was Annette Carter, who eventually was the state rep for the 7th District. Annette was a welfare rights organizer, and she was on this sponsoring committee that we had. And as a result of her being engaged, we got a little, the local folks on the committee got a little disappointed that the organizers, who were white folks at the time, didn't understand the neighborhood, and Annette and Father Geckler and others asked them to leave. We kept the funding, and then they asked me and a guy named Herb Watson to stabilize the project. And so I started out in the church basement in the mimeograph room, and learned organizing through a little bit of correspondence with the folks from the Volunteers in Service to America, the VISTA program, which is the domestic side of Peace Corps. I learned how to think about organizing and started organizing tenants in Clay Hill with the thing that we call the Clay Hill Coordinating Committee. And eventually our work up in the Northeast neighborhood led us to Lucy Summers and the older African-American folks up in the North End. They had more of a civic association type approach. We had a activist tenant approach, and we combined both approaches and eventually merged the two efforts in something that we ended up calling One Chain.
One Chain, yes.
Organized Northeasterners and Clay Hill and North End. So it was just the initials for the efforts that had gone on. We organized a decade up there. It was a decade of good organizing. Mostly tenant organizations, block clubs, and issue groups. And there's no surprise that the issue groups were crime, jobs, and youth activities. And they're still the same. Bread and butter.
Yes.
Straight bread and butter today. So I did that for a while. And I wouldn't say, I don't think that I missed anything that somebody who grew up in Farmington and Avon, because I was involved in my church, I was involved in my community. I had a lot of support for folks. I was poor, but everything's relative. A couple of times we were on the border of being homeless. But my mom knew how to hustle, and she knew if she needed to ask somebody for help, whether it was the church or a landlord. In most cases, my mom had to be the superintendent in order to make the rent. When I was involved between that little episode when I started at the church, I also got involved in the Ghetto Brothers and organized. Me and my brother and two other kids organized the Ghetto, which became one of the biggest Latino gangs in the city. But at that time, being in the gang was, the same as being in a yacht club. It's the options that were available to us. And there was, the there was no level of violence or guns or drugs and turf issues that ended up materializing in the late '80s and has gone on ever since. So being in a gang at that time was just part of growing up.
Okay.
The fact that our gang had 500 members was a little different,
A little different,
a little
yes.
different than that. But that was just those are options. I have my brothers have all struggled with. I should say all. The majority of my brothers have struggled with drugs.
Okay.
And they so it's I know what that is, how it affects the family.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate because of my engagement at the church and being 100% occupied. I didn't had to experiment and never got involved with that. But it's still touches my family today.
Okay.
My mom's been the one that has sort of taken the burden on for her entire life to deal with that. So I've had my brothers get involved in drugs as early as 13 years old.
Oh, bless you.
And we're all all affected by that. So, but it's like everything else. I wouldn't say it's been a good life. We had our options and we've been able to do the best we could with them.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty impressive story that you started at that age, organizing, being active in your church, basically being active in the community, and then you engaged in, One Chain, and then this organization, or the gang, as you call it, the Ghetto Brothers. And I believe most of these activities that you started was in the 70s, maybe the early 80s.
Yeah, I got out of high school in '76.
Okay.
But I was involved in church, early '72. As going a freshman into high school, I was already engaged. I was involved with the Model Cities activities. I was the student rep from Bonner Brown to Bill Quirk School.
Okay.
And it got a little late, so my brothers were the ones that enjoyed the school. And that, so I was involved in Model Cities with Maria Sanchez and John Banks and John Wilson and Edna Negron when they were activists in the neighborhoods. And I was just a kid getting my ears wet in community development. So by the age 18, I knew what I wanted to do, and I thought public service would be a good career, and it's been a great career. And I don't think it's going to end. I got another 20, 30 years of community activism in my blood, in my DNA, and I enjoy it.
Well, did you feel you was kind of unique in the 70s at your age, comparable to the rest of the youth that you grew up with, or your friends and peers, that you was doing more positive things? Was there more positive people out there at that time?
Yeah, I was one of the things that didn't happen was because I was at Hartford High and I was not, although I was very academically oriented. I took every math class. I took geometry. I took trigonometry. I took every science class, chemistry. I took physics, everything, because I was curious about it. But I wasn't on a college track because the goal of most of my peers and the households in even neighborhood, which is probably a 1 or 2 mile radius. I'm not talking about the rest of the city. Was to graduate from high school. If you graduated from high school, you did, traditionally 50% of the class that went into high school never graduated. And that still is, for 3.5 decades. That's been the case in the city of Hartford. The case in urban Black and Latino and Brown America, where poverty and concentration of poverty become factors, and it's very hard. The guy who put the Harlem Zone together said one thing that I think impressed me a lot is what he does for his kids in the Harlem Zone, which has been featured in 60 Minutes, is not teach them to beat the odds. Okay. What he does is try to change the odds by overwhelming kids with opportunity. And if you're overwhelmed with positive opportunity, the chances that you're going to do something negative and choose that way of life are diminished. They're not excluded, but and I think that's what happened to me. I had a lot of positive opportunities, and most of my peers. I mean, I still remember in the in high school, in my senior year in high school, most of my friends that were going to graduate could not read the sports page, but they were still going to get a piece of paper saying that they graduated from high school.
Yes.
They were being socially promoted rather than academically developed. So I kind of, on my own, was always interested in schooling and the academic side, so much so that my gang name was Professor.
Okay.
Because I carried books,
right.
and most of my peers couldn't even open up a book and read it. Most of them didn't own books. I didn't spend time at the library, but every time that I got to school, my teachers would feed my thirst for knowledge. So that made me a little different, I guess, than most of my peers. But the options that most of those kids had. There was a second group at the church that went off to college. So there was a group that the streets got to them.
Yeah.
There was a group like me that sort of made the best of what we had, and then there was a group that went off to college. Those kids did well.
Okay.
Those kids that either beat the odds or were given good opportunities, or they had a situation. My mom didn't know and didn't understand how to manage the educational system. She thought providing a roof and providing food on the table and making sure we had clean clothes and were respectful and had been introduced to God, all those things were enough. And that's what she could handle with nine kids. But those parents that were able to get their kids off to college did well. Again, that's a very small percentage. I would say less than 15% of my peer group went off to school. Less than another 10 to 15% were successful. They became bus drivers. They went to work at the manufacturing companies in town and have done okay. But over close to 60% got involved in street. 40% or greater were victims of violence and are no longer with us. A number of them went to jail, and a number of them, when AIDS hit this town and across the country, it was very common for me to visit my peers, and now it's 30 years ago, but the first 4 or 5 years were tough years for kids who were out and about doing drugs and on the streets, and a lot of them got affected by it. So it's been, when you start counting you could count them on one hand, the kids that you were in the 5th grade with, and how well they did.
Well, that's a reality check right there when you mention about, AIDS and gangs and drugs and the people that weren't able to be successful to move on with their life. I mean, that's probably urban America. And Hartford, Connecticut, the capital city that we are located in, is an urban city. We are a unique, small city, but we still have all of the major issues and major challenges of a large city. And it seems like to me your life up until this point, growing up, being involved in organizations, being involved with your church, being involved even with, a so-called gang, the Ghetto Brothers, kind of gave you a complete perspective on understanding the real world, what the city of Hartford is all about. And I guess at some point, you went towards your career or development working, but before you became elected mayor in 2001, what kind of guided you or prepared you to make a decision that you wanted to become mayor? Because I don't think people really go through high school and say they want to become mayor. I think it's like a life experience that kind of guides you toward that next level.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever the journey. It's a journey more than a plan and more than a dream or anything like that. I, from the early age, my mid-teens, I appreciated elected office. Anything I was doing involved public policy. In order to be able to affect change, you have to at least understand public policy. You have to understand how public policy is made, how it's implemented, how it's developed. So while I was not, aspiring to be an elected official, I was around elected and appointed official in my whole public service career because when I was working up in North Hartford, I really concentrated on low-income housing and how to fix deteriorated housing, and spent a lot of time figuring out how tenants up in North Hartford could benefit from many other federal programs. I was involved in the development of over 3,000 units up there. And some buildings that I worked on have been done 3 times over with federal programs. And I've understood how important home ownership is to a neighborhood, and how much, how to use zoning laws, and how density affects the economics of a neighborhood, all those things. So I became a very quick study, again, on not on a book-wise, but an actual experience of how the system works and who it works for and who it doesn't work for. So I was, and that's why, but early on I learned something about neighborhood organizing, which is, organizers are not in the front taking the credit for the work that gets done. Organizers are in the boiler room making sure that things are working. And when you're trying to empower people who have never felt in control, never felt the benefit of working in the public realm, and understand the sacrifices people have to go through in order for us to gain the opportunities we have, it's you got to take the victories as they come. So I understood early on that my role was to be in the behind. I mean, that's when I was at Trinity, people didn't understand how that got organized. They got organized by me spending time in church basements and living rooms on Broad Street. I lived on Broad Street for almost 8 years before the Learning Corps became a reality. But what I was doing is trying to get people that they could do something that nobody else had done. And they could do it by coming out to a meeting and being engaged, holding their elected officials accountable, and being part of the process. And not being inside the process, but being sort of holding the process somewhat honest. So that, the notion of empowering people was something that I always wanted to do. When I got involved in the charter reform, for those listeners that or viewers that don't know, charter revision is really the constitution of the city. And when you get involved in a small exercise like that, about how to set up the last time that the charter was resolved, it lasted some 40 plus years before it was reformed to what we know now as a strong mayor form of government. So what happened was I was involved in charter reform. The document we came up with, and Mayor Mike had put the commission together to look at this document. And then as soon as we were making some, what I consider soft recommendations, but they were not welcomed by a lot of people, especially moving to a strong mayor. So it was, community was evenly divided. But the fact that we said, no, we don't want to, we worked hard on this document, we believe in this document, and we think we should make it come to reality, then we started a little movement to get the charter reform passed. So that was another 6 months to a year of being engaged. So what happened was, I got involved in charter reform, which I hadn't done before. I got involved in the referendum to get it passed, and it became real clear to us that it didn't pass. It didn't even get on the ballot.
Yes.
So we had to go and re-strategize, and then we said, well, one way to do this is to have somebody from the inside push it.
Okay.
And conversations kept coming along that sort of made this a possibility for me. The other thing that was going on, wherever I went for before 5 or 6 years before I became mayor, everybody says, "You want to be mayor?" or "Here's the mayor," and so it sort of was around in the air. And I went home and had a discussion with my family, who at first said no.
Okay.
They didn't think it was a good idea. And then eventually, about a couple of weeks later, my daughter came in one evening and said, look, it's okay. If you got a dream, go ahead for it, and we'll support you just like we would expect you to support us if we wanted to. So the rest, as they say, is history.
Yes, yes. Okay. Now, 2001, you get elected mayor. You're the first Latino mayor in the city of Hartford, 20 years after we had the first African-American mayor in the city of Hartford. You're no longer now a resident, or just, well, you are a resident, but you're no longer just a typical citizen. You have a very influential position as mayor. About 2 years before we went towards a strong mayor form of government, what was the city like, and what was you facing when you became mayor in Hartford in 2001?
I think what the city had at the time, and the reason I probably got elected, was that we suffer from a lack of confidence, a little bit of an inferiority complex. We had asked the state of Connecticut, as a community, I don't think there were many voices against it, to take over the school system.
Okay.
We had gotten so bad at government that we had asked the state to come in and park cars. We couldn't run the parking authority.
Oh, okay.
And our school system was very accustomed to having a revolving door for superintendents, meaning that probably the most important component of a small urban community like Hartford, in order to change the way kids have opportunity in our city. Education is probably the strongest component. Some would argue a job, but if you can't do the job, there's no point in having a job out there for you. It was a case, one time that you didn't have to graduate your high school to go become a machinist at Pratt and Whitney, but now you got to know how to work a computer before you show up to work. So it's a reality. So I think we suffered that, and what the Learning Corps had done for folks was shown that there was a way of doing things, and that you had to kind of think out a little bit out of the box. So I think so we were in a little bit of a inferiority complex, and we had gone through a tough economic time at this. At one time, I think 3 or 4 years before I became mayor, we had 800 vacant buildings in the city.
I remember that.
800 vacant cities, and everybody was doing the best they could at it. So, I remember when I got elected on September 11th, the same day that the towers came down. Well, that was the primary. Right after the primary, before I got elected, I got a call from the governor. He's saying, you're going to get elected. First thing you're going to get is the school system back. And I said, wait a minute. I was running for mayor. I didn't know I was going to. I thought the state was running the school system for 5 years, and I didn't think that was. I had not given that a lot of thinking, because I thought, that was a little different from City Hall. I thought I was going to run City Hall. So that was a little wake-up call.
Okay.
And we got the system back, and they, what their question was, you're going to get back. How do you want it? What do you want to do? And so I wasn't totally ready for the responsibility of being mayor. But when I got anytime through hard work, a little bit of surrounding yourself with good people, and having a commitment to doing things right. So it was a little rocky, but we had a couple of things. The first one was during the first 2 years, we wanted to make sure that the budget was balanced, and that we had made a commitment to thinking about how to bring a little respect back to City Hall.
Okay.
And I say respect back because we had lost it somewhat, and not be shy about doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then as you're probably also aware of, our crime statistics were always in the news. We were always the FBI keeps track of the toughest cities in America, and somehow some cities are able not to report, but when you report and you tell the truth, your report comes out to be accurate what was happening in Hartford. And crime has always been a big challenge for a city. A lot of that at that time was youth violence, youth and youth crime, which was really tough to be able to have to go to funeral after funeral,
Yes.
and deal with the aftermath of how that affects, sometimes 2 or 3 families at a time. Because if it's a cousin, it's a cousin. So it's not just. So I spent a lot of time worrying about how to deal with that. But I was, I think people wanted to see good things happen. The biggest thing that we did is the educational system. We accepted it back. Eventually, we had started with I got a chance to shape the way it came back. So we started with a mix of appointees and elected, and I think that has served the city well in the Board of Ed. And the fact that we started apologizing for not performing, and then introducing new concepts into the school system has given us a little bit of more respect, and I think enthusiasm for folks. I mean, when you got folks from, when I got elected, parents were moving out of the city.
Yes.
Because of education and crime, maybe taxes sometimes, but not many. And then, now anytime we open up a magnet school in the city, we don't have trouble meeting the 30% from the suburbs, because we're competing with Bloomfield, Manchester, East Hartford. One time we had almost 3,000 kids from New Britain coming to the city. And, as I said, one of the things about my public service is the understanding of what opportunity does. Opportunity introduces limitless potential for people to excel, or limited potential to limit what you do. So I think that the magnet school system has challenged the whole region, not just Hartford. And it's good that West Hartford has to think about maybe we could lose kids to Hartford, and Granby has to think about losing kids to West Hartford. So it's competition's a good thing in education.
Okay. Well, former Mayor Eddie Perez, I live in the city of Hartford my entire life. So as a resident, I see firsthand what goes on in the city. And the 3 common denominators that you mentioned about why people leave the city is public safety, your educational system, your public school system, and overall quality of life. I mean, if you don't have no real opportunities in your city, it's tough for people to buy into your city as a nice city to want to invest in. Whether you took the city over under major problems, or you took the city over and you created the problems, you're still the mayor of the city. You still are responsible. And then you became the strong mayor of Hartford, the highest ranking government position in the city. Now you have more power and leverage to do things differently than you could have done the first 2 years. Now, from 2003, let's say 2003, I guess, was when they changed the charter, or 2002 when they changed the charter on revision. You became re-elected in 2003. So now you become the first strong mayor of government. So now you have the kind of power to make decisions not tied into the manager form of government. What was the power like, and how did you handle the power now as a strong mayor of Hartford?
Well, first of all, the reform of the charter only made what people thought in their mind. People thought that there was an actual mayor, and that the mayor had the power to do things. When I ran for mayor, I wouldn't have run for mayor just to be a ceremonial mayor. I didn't want to be a ceremonial mayor. So when the charter was revamped and the mayor became the chief executive office of a $500 million corporation. It was a business, and I did it as a business. And I had, I think that we had a little rocky start at the beginning, because the people in the Democratic Party at the time, when I became mayor under the old system, didn't want to have the question asked about whether we should move to a new system. And I had to develop a coalition with the Republicans and the independent Councilman Painter at the time. And I wouldn't say broke. I just had to exercise what I thought was my best option to be an effective leader in the city and continue the path. Because I could have stayed as a ceremonial mayor and been a member of the city council and let the manager run the system as professionally as it was envisioned. But no, so what we try to do is begin that process. And I say begin it because it takes more than 2 or 3 terms, even though they're 4-year terms, to realize the potential for the charter. We only began to scratch the surface of what we could do. The way the bureaucracy and the party system in this country works, it's not just because you get elected and just because you get the power that things change overnight. It takes a little while. For example, when I on the police department, it was very hard for me to see that the police department would change from within. So I had to go outside the system to recruit somebody. But when I recruited somebody, Chief Arnett, my main goal was for him to give me 4 to 5 police chiefs from inside the ranks. And that those people began thinking out of the box and not in the way normal Hartford crime prevention efforts were working. It took 7 years for me to move the police department from Jennings Street to High Street.
Yes.
And I say 7 years because it was a $75 million question to do that. I could tell you that we never got 100% because we had to leave some of the operation down on Jennings Street in order to make progress. But then when I got a chance to appoint Darrell Roberts as police chief after Stella that was not radical for somebody to look inside. So I did some things differently in order to be able to do things the Hartford way. You had to do those things. You had to sort of think out of the box. But there's no formula to success. My assumption was that there are things in the original charter that were implemented, that were in the charter, that were approved, that were not totally implemented, even after I got elected 2 more terms under that. There was still, we still got a long way to go to make the office of the mayor, make the city administration run smoothly, because there are a lot of old habits, a lot of old structures in place that have been institutionalized, and it's very difficult to kind of change those things. A simple thing is, collecting taxes and understanding our tax system. You got to choose your priorities and where you're going to spend time. I did not get to spend the time I thought that was needed to look at the way we finance the city, collect taxes and fees, and government revenue from the feds and the state, in order that to give people in Hartford, whether it's a homeowner or small business or one of our bigger businesses, a sense that every dollar that they give to the public system is well spent.
Okay.
So.
Now, Hartford is an area where we're the urban center, and outside of our city we have surrounding towns like Windsor, Bloomfield, West Hartford that seems to be doing pretty fairly better than our city in many different areas. And I guess you can't compare urban city to a suburban town, but Hartford has lost a lot of businesses to Windsor, to Bloomfield. Under your administration, we did lose ING, we did lose WFSB to Rocky Hill, Channel 3. Our downtowns, are not as strong as they used to be, but that happened even way before you were mayor. What is it like now as a mayor when you see the surrounding towns growing and developing and people are moving out there, and you're still struggling with trying to keep businesses that you already have in your city?
Well, it's so as a matter of perspective. You know, when you travel around the country as an elected official, and you know, we don't understand that we're a small state.
Okay.
3.5 million people makes a neighborhood in New York City.
Right. That's true.
Okay, and when I think of our city is probably between 25 to 30 towns, including the city of Hartford, make up our little metropolitan area. That's only about 600,000 people.
Okay.
Okay, but if you add up that mass, and you know, when ING moves 20 minutes away, and Aetna fills the whole building and pays the same taxes.
Okay.
And where would the people? If you ask yourself, well, what did we lose when ING went out there? How many people from Hartford were working on Farmington Avenue?
Right.
Okay, so this is a global economy. We live in metro areas. We don't live in little towns that were, you know, the boundaries were decided 300 years ago. We lived in so I don't. That's one of the reasons I always said that, you know, you got to look at a metro school system, a metro economy. The city of Hartford cannot be an economy unto itself.
Okay.
We can't put toll booths on the 12 major avenues and say we're going to charge people to come in. It's a fact of life that about 100,000 people come to work in the morning in a city where the unemployment rate is in the high 20s.
Yes.
Okay, so we play a function, and I was the one that had to visit the shelters and deal with the crime, and when you look at the address of an individual, they're not, most of the crime that's committed is not committed by people living in their neighborhoods. Most of the crime, most of the issues that when nobody else builds public housing or supportive housing or shelters. You know, if you go down to the South Park Inn and spend a night there talking to people and their stories, even if 50% of those folks were Hartford folks, there's still another 50% that come, somebody else's burden that we have to manage.
We have to manage, that's true.
You know, the hospital, two major hospitals are here. When people ask me about ING movement, I said ING wasn't here before that. Aetna was here. Aetna's still here. The Hartford Insurance Group has been bought and sold 5 times.
Okay.
The Travelers, Travelers was not Travelers. They had sold their umbrella, and they're still here. So you got to look at the small wins as well as the big losses. There's, ING was not a big. FSB, I don't know what FSB was adding to the capital city, although they were a broadcast house.
Yeah.
We made them a compelling proposal to stay in the city. Rocky Hill made them a better proposal from an economic perspective, and they went there. I'm not sure that somebody who's going to school or working in Hartford cares where that FSB is broadcasting.
Well, it is a tax base. You know, when you have a tax base in your city and you lose that tax base, that is an impact, unless you replace it with another legitimate business. And if people that work there downtown spend their money throughout the day, that does help the surrounding businesses in that particular area. Again, if you replace it with something else, then those same people can rely on that same business
Correct.
to fund their business. And again, Hartford is an urban city. We have complex issues. We have been doing things kind of maybe not the best way over a long period of time. And it's just too long of a history story to get into our city where it changed, where we used to have a very higher rate of population of people living in the city. And that's just changed. We just don't have the type of housing and the people that live directly in our city like we used to. The bottom line, though, I would like to ask you, what grade would you give the city when you left as mayor in 2010?
We're doing about a C.
Okay.
And I say a C because we were improving. I don't think we had gotten to the place anybody wanted us to be. And a C is not a good thing. Everybody wants an A. Nobody wants an F. And a C is not it's not all cylinders pumping in the right direction. The fact that we were able to stabilize the school system, the fact that we were able to balance our budgets we don't have the horror stories of other municipalities about them not funding their pensions, not funding, capital improvements. We spent over $800 million in school buildings, deferred maintenance that we had. Some of our schools were not great to walk into. Did we finish that job? No, it was going to be twice that amount before all the, we have 40 different school buildings that we had to worry about, and we only got just 22 of them.
Okay.
So we had a long way to go, and there's still a lot of work ahead. Hartford's not going to, Hartford's a city of opportunity, and it's a city of challenges. And there are folks in Hartford that are going to do well in Hartford and leave Hartford. There are folks who are going to do well and stay in Hartford.
Okay.
We're never going to become a population of 180,000 again.
Okay.
We're going to stay in the 130 to 100,000 people. But we are, nobody would survive without having a core capital city with the services we have. The Athenaeum is here. Movie theaters are not here, and they should be, because if we had a movie theater downtown, things would be a little. It's one more asset that you gotta have in order to be able to attract young people and young feet to the streets of downtown. So there's plenty of work.
Well, actually, a new movie theater just recently opened on Front Street, so that is one start. And I think many times as a resident, I see the perception, and it could be a reality, that downtown seems to be getting the attention more than your neighborhoods. It seems to be getting the development, the finance, the investment, the political clout. And your neighborhoods where I live at and many of your residents live at seems to be, on the back burner. I mean, whether you have to do things for yourself in your neighborhoods to be part of the solution more than hoping or waiting for government to come and fix the problem is a debatable issue. But you still live in the city of Hartford?
Yes, I live on Park Street.
Okay, so you're still a resident of Hartford.
I've only changed my zip code 3 times, and they've all been Hartford zip codes.
Okay.
And since I arrived here in 1969, this is a city of conveniences, and there are a lot of good things that happen. Does my wife go out to the mall? Yes, she goes out to the mall. If there was a mall in Hartford, does she go to a Walmart on Flatbush Avenue? Yes, because it's a convenient factor. At one time we had no supermarkets in the city. Now granted they're out in the border lines, but there's enough activity. I think that and this notion that it's either downtown or the neighborhood. I look at there's 17 neighborhoods in Hartford. Downtown is one of those neighborhoods.
That's true.
It's a critical neighborhood, and maybe the scale of a project that happens downtown is different but when a bodega opens up on Park Street or a beauty salon on Main Street, those are businesses, and those people work just as hard as the people who drive in from Simsbury to work in one of our office towers.
That's true. So you love the city of Hartford. You plan to continue to be a resident here in the city of Hartford?
As long as the missus says it's okay.
Okay, this is always important.
We've been at it for 37 years, so
Okay.
it's a 50-50 partnership. But you know what happens? She breaks the tie.
Okay, she does. That's true. Would you ever consider getting back in city government in any particular capacity?
You never say no. I don't. As I said, God has been a center of my life. Public service has been the way that I've been able to express that. So I'm always going to be involved in public service.
Okay.
Whether it's running a soup kitchen or running a city, nobody knows.
Well, Eddie, I really appreciate you coming here this morning, giving your life story, from the beginning towards where it is today. I think you've done a lot for the city of Hartford. I mean, the city of Hartford still has some major challenges, which you was honest enough to admit. And you gave the grade average a C, which is not good enough, but it's a fair assessment. Where would you like to see the city of Hartford go at this particular point into the remaining decade?
I think that one of our biggest challenges is continuing to improve the educational system. And as you said, is balancing the interests of our neighborhoods and sort of the downtown issue. The other one is that, I believe that City of Hartford's always been a city of opportunities.
Okay.
It's going to do that. There is big changes in the demographic of our cities.
Mm-hmm.
There's more immigrants and folks coming in that are changing the face of Hartford.
Okay.
And I think that's a good thing. That's what the good Lord, when he sent Reverend Hooker down to establish the House of Hope on the shores of the Connecticut River, which became the first settlement in Hartford. So as long as we keep our door open to folks to do the best they can, the city's going to be in good hands.
Good hands. Well, one thing I did forget, and I know we're kind of running down on time, quickly, would you be in favor of regionalizing the city of Hartford if you had your choice?
Well, I think that there already are a number of regional approaches. And whether or not, I don't think that's going to be a question that the city of Hartford could dictate or even propose. I think necessities will continue to force more collaboration. I mean, for example, CREC, the Capital Region Education Council, is a big school district now.
Okay.
Competing for Hartford for kids. And, you know, education and transportation. If you know how many buses kids are entering and how much it's costing us. So they're easy things. You would think that it would be easy for us to talk about transportation and schooling, but we can't do it with trash. We can't do, you know, so it's going to take another 10 to 20 years before regional governance comes to it. And you don't have to get rid of the city boundaries in order to create cooperative structures. I think it's going to take a courageous governor rather than a courageous mayor. It's not going to come from inside. It's going to be required out of necessity for us to become better at delivering services. You know, the City of Hartford is the only one with a bomb squad in the area, but we have to pay for it. But when the bomb squad has to go out to Manchester, it goes out to Manchester because we are good neighbors.
Okay. Well, Eddie Perez, I enjoyed this particular hour. Well, I think two things me and you have in common is that we both love and care about this city, and we are residents of this city, and I think that carries a lot of weight. Whether we agree or disagree on issues, that's part of life. I think we're always going to have that. I think one thing I do want to tell people out there, the show is called All About You. One thing is very important as a resident is do your civic duty, you know, participate. This is a former mayor here in the city of Hartford. This morning, he gave you his life story, how he got involved in the problem. He didn't just want the problem and hope that somebody else fixed the problem. Again, you might not agree with everything he did as a mayor, but he did do something. He got involved and he made a difference, and you can't take that away from him. Hopefully in the future we could have other elected officials. I don't want to turn this into just a political show, but I felt this morning was very important to have the former mayor Eddie Perez here in office. Eddie Perez here in the studio. One last thing you would like to say before we close?
Well, thank you for having me. Happy birthday.
Thank
and
you.
Really, to the residents of our city, I want to wish them a very joyful holiday season.
Okay. Well, again, this is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. This program is a weekly program that I do along with my executive and producer every week. I enjoy what I do. I think it's a fulfilling job, or I don't even look at it as a job. Again, I really appreciate my guests coming here this morning, devoting an entire hour to do this program. And in the near future, we're going to have other high-profile people on this show. The show is called All About You, a show that gives the guests their entire life story from the beginning to the end, and it's going to continue to grow going into the new year if it's God's willing. Anybody else have anything else in the future? Everybody have a very blessed day. Thank you.